Thank you. Then we shall start. We proceed with the last talk of the day, which is going to be by Roald Dahl, Koudenburg. And the title of the talk is Formal Day Convolution and Low-Dimensional Monoidal Fibrations. And Roald, you can take the stage whenever you feel like.
Thanks for the introduction, Ivan, and also thanks to the organizers for organizing this and inviting me. It's great to talk here. So this talk will be about formalizing the classical notion of the day convolution and then using it to study monoidal fibrations of low dimensions. So I'll start with a plan of the talk and also a bit of motivation. So recall that the classical Grothendieck construction gives an equivalence between category-valued pseudo-functors and fibrations. So that equivalence and also generalizations of it, I will call Grothendieck equivalences. Can you also see my pointer? So, okay. So recently, Crutwell, Lambert, Pronk, and Zilt proved a Grothendieck equivalence for double fibrations. So those are fibrations between double categories. And my motivation is to extend it to monoidal double fibrations. And that would have that could have applications in the area of applied category theory. So that's my motivation. This is still work in progress so far, so I will only briefly talk about this. Today I want to focus on a one-dimension lower case, so I want to prove a Grothendieck equivalence for two monoidal two-up fibrations, ones that are locally discrete and that are split. To do that, I will obtain it as a formal result, within the setting of augmented virtual double categories. And that formal result then applies both to the two-dimensional case and to the double-dimensional case. So the start will be augmented virtual double categories, and then having introduced those, I will introduce a formal notion of Yoneda embeddings in them, and for us, these Grothendieck equivalences, they will be corresponding to certain Yoneda embeddings. So a Grothendieck equivalence will exist if and only if the corresponding Yoneda embedding exists. So the main result of this talk is giving conditions that ensure that algebraic Yoneda embeddings can be lifted, algebraic in that they are algebraic over a monad, and using that result, we can obtain Yoneda embeddings, formal Yoneda embeddings in augmented virtual double categories of monoidal categories, and monoidal two categories, and monoidal double categories. And these Yoneda embeddings, they will give us the monoidal Grothendieck equivalences that we are looking for. So let's start with these augmented virtual double categories. They consist of objects, vertical morphisms between them, like F and G here, and then horizontal morphisms as well, like K here in the bottom, that are drawn with a bar on their arrows. And the two types of cells, there is unary cells that have a single horizontal morphism as their target, as their horizontal target, and a sequence of horizontal morphisms is their horizontal source. And that includes cells like this that have an empty horizontal source. Besides these unary cells, there's also nullary cells that have an empty horizontal target. So These include cells like this that I call vertical, where both the source and the horizontal target is empty. So in particular, every augmented virtual double category will contain a two category of objects, vertical morphisms, and vertical cells. So then there is a vertical composition of vertical morphisms and also of cells. That composition for cells looks a bit like operatic composition. And there is identity morphisms for the objects and identity cells for the morphisms, both vertical and horizontal. And we're using this weak type of double category because our horizontal morphisms won't compose in general, and also we won't have all horizontal units in general. So that's why we're using this weak type of double category. So two toy examples then, one-dimensional examples. Both of these have locally large categories as objects and functors between them as vertical morphisms. Their horizontal morphisms from A into B are as follows. So augmented virtual double category of pro-functors has small set valued pro-functors. So functors from A op times B into small sets. Then the augmented virtual double category of small discrete op fibrations that has as horizontal morphisms op fibrations with base category A op times B. And its fibers should be a small discrete, so these should be small sets. Okay, so now we want to move towards the formal notion of Yoneda embedding in these augmented virtual double categories. For that, we need another notion that's restrictions of objects along two vertical morphisms into that object. So nullary restriction of the object C along F and G is a horizontal morphism denoted by C of F and G. That is equipped by a Cartesian cell like this, so that has a certain universal property. I won't explain what that is. It's not so important. If F or G is the identity, if one of them is the identity, then we get what is called the companion or the conjoint of the other morphism. So these are both, companion and conjoint are both nullary restrictions. So examples in pro-functors, there that nullary restriction is just given by restricting the home sets of this category C, but C might be locally large, remember, so this restriction of its home sets only gives a horizontal morphism in prof if these home sets are small. Companion and conjoint are just the representable pro-functors. In op fibrations, that nullary restriction is the comma category of the two functors. So, and again, that has small fibers only if these home sets are small. And companion and conjoint are given by these comma categories, where one of the functors is the identity. So now we can define formal Yoneda morphisms. That is a morphism Y from A into A hat that is weakly dense. I won't explain what that means. And also it satisfies a Yoneda axiom. So that means that for every horizontal morphism coming out of its source of that Yoneda morphism, there is a Cartesian cell like this. So that means there is a vertical morphism from the target of J into A hat. It's called J lambda, I call it J lambda. And there's a Cartesian cell that defines J as the nullary restriction of A hat along Y and J lambda. And in prof, we just get, we recover the classical Yoneda embeddings for let the A be a locally small category, then we can just look at the usual Yoneda embedding into pre-sheaves of A. Then we can take J lambda to be mapping each object in B to this pre-sheaf that is the images of J with B fixed. That gives a pre-sheaf on A. And then the Cartesian cell, well, we need to show that J is isomorphic to this home set of pre-sheaves, but that is exactly Yoneda's lemma. So in proof, this formal notion recovers the usual Yoneda embeddings. Okay, then let's look at these op fibrations as well. We will just look at one single Yoneda morphism there. And we'll use an equivalent definition of that Yoneda morphism, so that we can use that whenever all these unary restrictions of A hat exist along Y on the left and along any morphism G into A hat on the right. So if they all exist, then they form the object part of a functor between leg slice categories. I won't go into that much either, but the source here is this leg slice category of vertical morphisms into A hat, and the target here is a leg slice category of horizontal morphisms coming out of A. Right, so every G is a vertical morphism like that, and it's that restriction that it is mapped to is a horizontal morphism like this. And the theorem is that Y is a Yoneda morphism if and only if this functor of leg slice categories is an equivalence. So let's look at the usual Yoneda embedding for the terminal one category. So in that case, A hat is just small sets. Let's look at these restrictions for that Y. Well, these are these comma objects, comma categories, and if you look at them, you will see that they are exactly the Grothendieck deconstruction of these functors into small sets. So that's what this functor does, and that it is an equivalence is precisely the Grothendieck equivalence for discrete op fibrations, right? That gives an equivalence between functors into small sets and small discrete op fibrations. Let me make one remark here. If you know what Yoneda structures are on a 2 category, those structures also have formal Yoneda morphisms, but they do not give such an equivalence of leg slice categories, at least not without extra structure. So I don't know that what I'm doing here, if it is also possible to do that with these Yoneda structures. Okay, so now we want to get a monoidal variant of what we did before. So we'll look at augmented virtual double categories of monoidal profunctors and monoidal op fibrations. These will have lex monoidal categories as objects. So these are monoidal categories with unbiased tensor products, a tensor product for each arity, and coherence morphisms are not invertible, and lex monoidal functors between them as vertical morphisms. So in non-prof, a horizontal morphism between lex monoidal categories, well, to make the description easier, let the source be a monoidal category, so with invertible coherence morphisms, still unbiased. In that case, such a monoidal profunctor is a lex monoidal functor from J op times B with their tensor products into into set with its Cartesian structure. For monoidal small discrete op fibrations, a horizontal morphism, again, let's make it a bit easier. Let's take the source to be the terminal one category with the unique monoidal structure. That is a small discrete op fibration that is a strict monoidal. So also the total category will have a tensor product here, and that op fibration is strict monoidal with respect to these tensor products. So this is a discrete variant of the notion of monoidal fibration by Hermida and Schulman. And this being discrete also means that the tensor product on the total category preserves the chosen op Cartesian lifts. So these two augmented virtual double categories of monoidal categories, they are in fact augmented virtual double categories of Lex algebras over the free strict monoidal category monad on Prov and OpFib. So we'll use that in our main result here. So let T now be any monad on any augmented virtual double category, and it induces an augmented virtual double category of Lex T algebras. Then the main result is as follows: given a Lex T algebra A with structure map little a, right? So that goes from T of A into A, and a unidamorphism Y on from A into A hat, where a priori A hat doesn't have to have a unidal algebraic structure. So we assume that a pointwise weak composite exists. I won't tell you what that is. Of the conjoint of A with the T image of the companion of Y. So that will be a horizontal morphism coming from A and going into TA hat. And by the Yoneda axiom, that horizontal morphism corresponds to a vertical morphism V from TA hat into A hat. Right? That the Yoneda axiom for that formal Yoneda embedding. So under some conditions, that morphism V extends to a Lex T algebra structure on A hat, and with respect to that structure, Y becomes a pseudo T morphism that makes it into a unidamorphism in the augmented virtual double category of Lex T algebras. So, just like in a non-algebraic case, if all these restrictions exist, so these are not algebraic restrictions, just in the original augmented virtual double category, then we obtain an equivalence of Lex slice categories of algebraic morphisms. So Lex T morphisms into A hat correspond to horizontal T morphisms coming from A. And well, I didn't tell you what these horizontal T morphisms are, but in the last slide they were monoidal profunctors and monoidal op fibrations. So what do we get in our toy examples? In one Prov, well, you can see that when you look at that composition of horizontal morphisms of profunctors that is given by a coend, and that will exactly give you the day convolution structure on pre-sheaves on A. So so that we recover day convolution using that main result. If A is monoidal again, then the equivalence that we get is an equivalence of Lex monoidal functors into A hat and monoidal functors coming out of A. So this is a result by Pisani. Then monoidal fibrations. So we look at, we take as source the terminal category. The lifted structure on its pre-sheaf category is just a Cartesian structure on small sets. And the equivalence that we get is a monoidal Grothendieck equivalence of Lex monoidal functors into small sets and monoidal small discrete op fibrations. Monoidal small discrete op fibrations. So this is a variation on a result of Muller and Vasilakopoulou. They do the non-discrete case. So I'll tell you more about the relation in a bit. So the first takeaway of this talk is that if we formalize that deconvolution, then we can unify original classical deconvolution and this monoidal Grothendieck equivalence. So we want to move up a dimension because we also want to be able to do non-discrete fibrations. So there we get to discrete two-op fibrations. So that is short for locally discrete split two-op fibrations. Those are two functors such that their underlying one functor is a split op fibration, and their restrictions to the home categories are all discrete fibrations. So they satisfy a two-dimensional Grothendieck equivalence between two functors into the two category of categories, functors and natural transformations, and these discrete two-op fibrations, right? These locally discrete split two-op fibrations. And that is given as follows. So any two functor G from B into ket is mapped to the Lex, 2 category of first Uneda embedding for the terminal 2 category and that G. Right, so we want to apply our main result to this Uneda embedding for the third terminal 2 category. To be able to do that, we first need an augmented virtual double category of discrete two-op fibrations. And when you think about that, at first it might seem hard because these Lex, 2 categories, they are defined by Lex natural transformations, and they don't form a 2 category. So in particular, we cannot take, there's no augmented virtual double category with as vertical cells Lex natural transformations, because vertical cells always form a 2 category. But so somewhat surprisingly, there is a way, and we use another result by Lambert. Okay, yeah, this 2 Grothendieck equivalence was also by Lambert. And this second result says that discrete two-op fibrations are precisely internal profunctors from the terminal 2 category into the Lex arrow 2 category on this 2 category B. So these are internal in the category of locally large 2 categories and 2 functors between them. So using that, we can define an augmented virtual double category of small discrete 2-op fibrations as a sub-augmented virtual double category of internal profunctors in 2-ket. So it will have locally large 2 categories as objects, 2 functors as vertical morphisms, and horizontal morphisms, let's again restrict to source being the terminal 2 category. These are then small discrete 2-op fibrations, like in the previous slide, but again we need small categories as fibers. Then let's look a bit at the cells of this augmented virtual double category of discrete 2-op fibrations. First, have a look at unary cells, phi. These are simply split-op Cartesian 2 functors between the discrete 2-op fibrations. Right, so they preserve the chosen op Cartesian lifts strictly. Vertical cells here, chi, psi, this is psi, between two functors f and g, so these cannot be the Lex natural transformations. Instead, they are the strict natural, so the two natural transformations. Then these nullary cells, they are the Lex natural transformations. So a nullary cell like this is a Lex natural transformation from the constant two functor that picks out this this object D in the target here into mapping into the two-op fibration P followed by this two functor G. So they are not all Lex natural transformations. They are only those that satisfy some equivariance axioms. So I'll show you one of these equivariance axioms. If you have a morphism in the base category, U coming from a P image, so then we can lift it. We can look at its op Cartesian lift. That will be going from J into the push forward of J along U. So that target, that push forward, that is in J, so we can look at the chi component for that push forward, and that will be a morphism from D into GP of the push forward, but of course P of the push forward is B, so this will be a morphism from D into GB. And the axiom says that should be equal to this composite here, chi at J, and then followed by G of U. So in this augmented virtual double category, that Yoneda embedding for the terminal two-dimensional category satisfies the axioms of that. Well, is a formal Yoneda morphism as we want it to be. And the second takeaway of this talk is that it is surprising to me that this works. That you would think that for Lex natural transformations you need a three-dimensional setting, but it turns out this double dimensional setting, which in the end is a two-dimensional thing, you can also capture these Lex natural transformations. Right, so now we can apply the main result to this Yoneda embedding for the terminal 2 category, and we get a two-dimensional monoidal Grothendieck equivalence between Lex two monoidal two functors into the 2 category of categories with its Cartesian structure, and these monoidal discrete two-op fibrations. I haven't told you what those are yet, so if we have two Lex, two monoidal two categories, J and B, then a monoidal discrete two-op fibration between them is a discrete two-op fibration that is a strict monoidal with respect to the tensor products, and such that tensor product on the total category preserves lifts, and the Cartesian lifts of the coherence morphisms of B, they are exactly the coherence morphisms of J, as it is. That is what this means, these two conditions mean here. So let me talk a bit about how this compares to Müller's and Vasilakopoulos' result for non-discrete one fibrations. So we only consider two monoidal two functors here. So that means that the coherence transformations are strictly natural, whereas Müller and Vasilakopoulos treat pseudo-monoidal structures. where the naturality is is invertible. So these last two conditions, they are exactly the conditions that that are equivalent to these two Lex monoidal two functors being two monoidal. So having strictly natural coherence transformations. So that's more restrictive in our case, but we've extended slightly into the two-dimensional, into the second dimension, even though we're still looking at locally discrete ones. And we're also it also applies to Lex monoidal structures. So we're getting a bit of a new result here. But once again, it would be nice to remove this discrete here to apply to be able to apply to any two-op fibration. So we would like to move up another dimension, and then we get to what are called double discrete two-op fibrations. And these are between double two categories. So these are pseudo categories in the two category of two categories, functors and natural transformations. So those are really three-dimensional objects. So the first row here is one of these double two categories. It has a two-category J0 of objects, vertical morphisms, and cells between them, and it has a two-category J1 of horizontal morphisms, cells, and three cells between those. So this is now three-dimensional. Double discrete two-op fibration between two of these double two categories, J and B, that consists of two discrete two-op fibrations, one between the category of objects and one between the categories of horizontal morphisms. Such that all these commuting squares here are split up Cartesian. So I know that together with Lex double two functors, these double discrete two fibrations form an augmented virtual double category again. A Lex double two functor is a functor between these double two categories that is strict in the vertical direction and Lex in the horizontal direction. Krautwell and his co-authors proved a double Grothendieck equivalence for these double fibrations, and if it is possible, and I think it should be, but I haven't checked that yet. If it is possible to generalize that to one for these double discrete two-op fibrations, then we should be able to apply that main result again and hence get a Grothendieck equivalence for monoidal double discrete two-op fibrations. Thanks for listening. This was it. I've written the references here to papers with the results that I've mentioned.
Thank you very much, Roald. And I think now we can move to, maybe would you stop sharing because I see my face too big and yeah, thank you. Okay. We have time for questions now. And so if someone wants to ask a question, that's a good moment to do it. Sorry, and thank you for the nice talk, of course.
Thanks.
I've got a question, if I can ask one. First of all, thank you for the very nice talk. Seems to be a really elegant framework for addressing these sorts of questions. So the question about the lifting theorem that you mentioned sort of midway through the talk. So there are lots of these examples of deconvolution-like results for various structures like skew monoidal categories, categories of finite limits, this sort of thing where the proof is generally quite similar, but has to be carried out by hand each time. So I was wondering, with your result, how much of the sort of work is alleviated and how much work is left for each individual case. So for instance, can you apply your result to skew monoidal categories? How much do you need to check to make sure that you get this lifting?
I mean, I haven't tried that. I guess the first thing you need to check is there an augmented virtual double category? Do you have pro functors or something like that, right? Do you have horizontal morphisms? And yeah, then does the monad extend to them? That might not be the case. I mean, once those two work, yeah, then you can go and see if you get something, right? I guess. But yes, I haven't looked at that at skew monoidal categories.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Natanya, for your question. Do we have one other question? Okay, if we don't, let's thank the speaker. Thank you, Roald, for your nice talk. We have our last round of applause. And thank you very much. And don't forget that we have our last physical meeting next month. Sorry, our last online meeting next month. And then we will have our physical meeting in December. Check out the webpage for details on that. And for today, we are done. Thank you to all the speakers for joining. And Nikolai has already left, but thank you. And if people want to stick around and chat, unfortunately, I will have to leave. But if there is someone of the organization that can hold the chair, people can stick around and chat. And thank you, Gabriele, for sharing the link.
Yeah, I can stay around if you have to leave. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can stay for 5 minutes or so, but
But
I will
you might
have
want
to.
to stop the recording though.
Oh, that's a very good point. Yes.